The first year of marriage is the hardest.
This is one of the stories we never have been told.
We also tend to think that Indian spices are what attracted people from other countries to come and colonize India. But that is half truth.
So I wanted to ask you a question about what's your go-to kissa, go-to story to tell people when you sit in a gathering and all? What's your go-to story to tell people?
Well, when I sit in gatherings, I bore everyone with my never-ending stories about Indian textiles.
Oh.
So right now, I had this exact same conversation with a few people a couple of days ago. How I like to approach this, because as you said, that I'm probably one of the few creators who mostly talks about Indian textiles. But there are many creators who have been talking about saris for a long time now. Ever since Instagram started, I think sari influencer trend has been going on nonstop. But I have slight reservation about that concept. I'm not objecting to sari influencing, but what has happened is that we have ended up equating Indian textiles with saris. So people who do not wear saris, either men or children or women who are just not interested in saris, they think, oh, this is only for people who wear saris, and they don't like to take an interest in Indian textiles. But how I got into this is because once I actually started by reading about saris. But when I started reading about saris, I discovered that it was never about saris. It was always about textiles, and the history, sociology, economics, the entire development of these three streams in India can be traced with the history of Indian textiles. So we all know that India once upon a time was a very prosperous place, and the Europeans, especially the British, they siphoned off many trillion dollars worth of money from India. But where did that wealth come from? That wealth primarily came from textiles. And this is what people do not realize, that India had been exporting textiles from the time of Indus Valley civilization. There are fragments of textiles found in a cemetery in Jordan that is said to be one of the earliest textile fragments ever discovered. And those have been traced to Indus Valley civilization. We cannot imagine the amount of trade that was going on from so far back. And I mean, I know we as Indians, we put a lot of importance on food, which we should. And we also tend to think that Indian spices are what attracted people from other countries to come and colonize India. But that is half truth. But the thing is that this is what something I was told by a senior curator of Royal Ontario Museum. And it was quite fascinating to hear, because despite being an Indian, I had never thought of things that way. She said that, she asked me that, why did the Europeans go to India? And it says, to do business, get more money. But she said that the Europeans went to India for textiles. The Europeans did not actually go to India to get spices, because by then they had already discovered Spice Islands, which is Indonesia and that archipelago. They came to India to get the textiles. So they took the textiles from India, they took them to Southeast Asia, they bartered Indian textiles for spices from Southeast Asia, which they took to Europe. So essentially, textiles was at the heart of colonization. Before colonization, textiles was at the heart of India being so rich. Indian weavers were not glorified in ancient times because Indian women were wearing saris. Indian weavers were glorified from ancient times because they could change their design aesthetics and they could cater to various export markets. And Indian kings and queens from ancient times were so rich because they could export these valuable textiles. So the Europeans also came here for the textiles. And then she said that, why this is why the British primarily came, and why were the British forced to move out of India? That is also for textiles. We all know about that Swadeshi movement and Khadi movement.
Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, this is one of the stories we never have been told in our school or education system. Textiles have never been mentioned, how textile change
Absolutely not.
the India.
Exactly the thing. And if you think about it, most of even the Europeans used to call them karkhana, or the factories that they set up initially when they first arrived, even before Battle of Plassey happened. They were mostly around textile areas. One was around
Mm.
Bengal area. So there was port and textile. These are the two things that they wanted. So
Yeah,
Bengal area, then you had Madras, and then you had Surat. These were the primary
right.
textile
Yeah,
production areas, which also had a port. So
yeah,
one reason why the British settled in Bengal earlier than many other places in India was for two reasons: for textiles and for saltpeter. So as you know, saltpeter was used to make gunpowder and textiles. So it was at the very heart of it has always been at the heart of Indian history. But I think the problem is that not just in India but globally, people tend to associate anything to do with clothing as belonging to the fashion industry, and
yeah,
associate it with vanity. Uh, but that's not exactly true. I mean, we the primary purpose of wearing clothes is to protect oneself from the elements of nature, but also people historically have been making a lot of statements through clothes, whether it's Gandhi's langotia or Nelson Mandela's shirt. uh, or I mean, people have been
yeah,
making revolutionary comments, the statements through clothes. So it is much more than fashion, and also textiles is not just about clothes. It is also about curtains, what you use on the bed. And back in the days in India, textiles were also used as part of furniture like shamiana. So to
yeah.
construct buildings or tents or canopies, they were that were very much in use. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
can go on
like,
and on about it, and you'll be bored by
yeah,
the end.
you should go on and on. I'm just finding it interesting to know about all this because, as I already mentioned, we have never told about this. As you mentioned, we have told like Europeans, Britain, everybody came for the gold or the spices. That's it,
Yeah,
nothing else other than that. And now I'm realizing that textile played a very big role. That's why we see here and around like how Indian textile has been going around the world. And I think
yeah.
you are the biggest. You are playing a good role in that and bringing out an awareness about the textile industry. And thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I wanted to ask about one thing like currently you are in London and you are practicing your doctorate and everything. And
Yeah,
but your love for textile brings you back to India and you travel a lot.
I do. Yes.
Saw your Instagram and all the time I've searched about, read an articles and all. You're traveling a lot. So I know traveling can be hectic while you are doing from London to again and again and back and forth. And so I would like to ask you a few questions around it. And
Yeah, sure,
what's
sure.
what's that place you went to and where you realized like you are there basically? Like I would say like I can't make it more specific. Like what's your best destination you went to and you felt like other than textiles and all, you felt like oh, I am there now. Have you had any
Oh,
incident like that?
I mean, I've been to so many places and I've enjoyed every single part, but recently I went to Ladakh, and I
uh,
went there with the purpose of doing a Pashmina trail.
hmm,
And as you know, that part of Ladakh is nomadic,
yeah,
and the Pashmina goats are reared by the nomads. So I also got the opportunity to spend time with the nomads and also stay with them in nomadic tents. And that was unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. That was completely different. I know they have recently been touched by, if you call technology or civilization or whatever you
yeah,
want to call, I in the sense that they have mobile phones, and they have tinned food. But then even then, they actually are nomads who move from one part of the mountain to another with all their belongings and their herd, and set up tents to spend some time looking after their their herds. Um, they obviously, those places do not have electricity. They do not have like proper toilets. They create makeshift toilets in there. It was very different, and they are so hospitable. But it was completely connecting with nature. We did not have electricity, so we could not charge our phone. There was absolutely no mobile connection for a few days. I was completely disjointed from the rest of the world, and with such immense natural beauty that Ladakh offers, leading life in the hunter gatherer way, that was a very surreal experience.
I'm sure that would be like beautiful experience. The dark seems to be a beautiful place, and
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
that. What are the things like traveling taught you? See, you meet a lot of people. You talk to a lot of people while traveling, and if you don't want to talk to them or you don't know, but you still see
Yeah,
things around you,
interact. Yes, there will be
and
interaction. Yeah.
it changes after I would say a 100 kilometer, 200 kilometer. Things change in India. It certainly changes after some distance
Yes,
you
it
travel,
does.
and things people change how they talk, how they see life, and
Yeah.
so what are the some things you learned while traveling from people, like but basic things of life? I don't want to go get into something like a big deals, because I
No,
feel
no.
like small things, if you think like that and you learn from that, impact a lot more than a big things like, oh, change it
No,
or
of
do it.
course. No,
What
no,
are
no,
the
of course.
some small things you learned and you saw in people, basically your observation? I'm asking about your observation, not something someone told you about, yeah, this is an advice. What you observed in some people which helped you, like, oh.
So if you talk about India travel only, because I've always loved traveling, I've always traveled, and before pandemic, it was mainly about traveling to various European destinations, because that's
Mm,
also close to London, and
yeah.
every weekend, all the weekends, I either used to be on call or I used to travel. So I was never at home on weekends. But traveling so much, I mean, that obviously opens your mind. You interact with people of different ethnicities, and then you realize at the base we are all the same, and we are trying to do the best for ourselves and our families.
Yeah.
So it made me a more tolerant and an open-minded person. But then after the pandemic, I decided to travel more in India.
Mm,
So that since 2021, I actually have traveled extensively in India, and I have focused on craft based travel, which takes me
yeah.
to a lot of rural destinations in India. Uh, and I have observed, since you have asked for my observation, that, see, I belong to what you can call an upper middle class. In India,
Yeah.
we have got that class, right? So that is where I come from. So I come from a lot of privilege. Uh, and most of the people I interact with on a daily basis belong to the same strata. But once I started really discovering Indian rural landscape, I learned that there's a, a distinctive difference between how Indians in villages think and how we think. And I would place people in villages far above us. They are far more open minded, they are far more tolerant, they are far better, they are far progressive, far liberal than most of us can even imagine. So I mean, I always say this to others, that if I have hope for India, that is because of the people who live in villages, not because of the people who live in cities. In cities, people actually, we have got a very narrow minded view of life, and most of us are unable to come out of our privileged prism and view the world as a whole. But I guess in villages, probably because I guess they have slightly more struggles with basic infrastructure than people in cities. They are able to, appreciate the smaller details and have a more open minded view of the world. And there's also something that my husband told me once. He's forced to go on these journeys with me, but he once told me that, look, if you did not force me to visit all these places, I would never have understood how big a role textiles play in the economy of India.
Yeah.
How much rural population is dependent on textiles. So Agriculture is the biggest employer of India, and the second largest employer is textile industry. It plays a massive role. It is not just about a few thousand weavers weaving. It literally takes a village to make a piece of cloth. There will be people involved in dyeing, people involved in spinning, people involved in lots of pre and post production stages. So it is very integral to the economic structure of even present day India.
Like I, when you say it, I think of as in like you said, urban cities where people are with a narrow mind. I feel
Mm,
because rural India is fighting for the needs and the urban
exactly.
India is fighting for the wants. So they are not
Exactly.
very open
Exactly.
about.
Very well put. Very well
Yeah.
put.
So
Exactly. Fighting for the knee, and that sort of puts things in perspective for them. I think.
yeah, as you're talking about cultures and different rural areas, is I wanted to ask. I thought I researched about things because some in India basically everything is related to somewhere culture and religious beliefs or something like that. So do you have any stories or some textile basically which is connected deeply into a culture or practices related to beliefs, something like that, if there is any?
Uh, well, there are lots of cultural customs in India based on textiles. Like in many parts of India, there will be, certain textile designs that are specifically to be worn by certain communities.
Okay.
Uh, in fact, that probably is almost like a uniform rule all over India. Definitely not in all communities, but even in Ladakh, I observed the same thing. There was one particular um, nomadic community, and they said that they make rudimentary textiles of various stripe designs, and each family will have their own design. So you'll know which family a person is
Yeah.
coming from looking at the type of clothes they are wearing. And even in Rajasthan, Gujarat, there are rural communities where each community will have their own textile design, and you will know where they are coming from.
I was going through a reason. I landed on a reel where you talked about Jodha not being Jodha in
Yes.
Berlin.
Yeah.
It crashed me. I'll be honest. Like it crashed me. Like, oh, we have been told and seen the movie and everywhere. Jodha Akbar, the amazing love story of India, where
Yeah.
intercaste marriage and whatsoever, and you like trashed it basically.
Well,
So I
it
want.
was a political alliance. She still was treated very well. I
Yeah, of
hope and
course.
I assume. But it was a political alliance. It was not the Bollywood love story that we would like to believe.
Yeah, you danced Uriya and you performed and all. I think if I'm not wrong, you said ki half Uriya dancer or like a mature Uriya dancer. you went. So what's the story behind it? Ki, like how did you get into it and how was your childhood like and how was your school life?
Well, I was a very typical Indian good girl, very obedient, good in studies, did not cause any ruckus. Uh, I was enrolled in dance school when I was very little, but I did not enjoy the experience there. There was quite a bit of what I now know as bullying, but back then I was
Oh,
too young to understand. And in my days, we did not really have any conversation around bullying, and there was absolutely no awareness.
yeah.
We did not even know that the name exists. Um, so I hated every second, and I asked my parents to take me off, which they did. Then I focused on my studies. Then around, I think when I was in class 10 or 11, I watched a dance performance and I was so enamored and I wanted to be on stage. I did 1 year of MBBS, and then I asked my mother if she could get me private classes in
Yeah.
dance. And thankfully, I mean, I always have to acknowledge my privilege because not everyone can afford to do that. But thankfully, my parents could afford that fees for me. Um, and that's how my Guruji, he started uh, teaching me dance. And he was very affectionate, but he was also like a very strict classical dance guruji. So for the first 1 year, I only learned exercises. He wouldn't let me do anything else. But he made sure that my foundation was strong, and having private lessons makes a huge difference because he could focus on my footwork, my expressions, my hand gestures, everything without any distraction.
Yeah.
So that's really how I got into classical dancing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And like, I think these little things, some extracurricular activities or some dance and all, shape your personality in a very,
Yeah,
very different
it has
way.
discipline. For example, I mean, like I said, that I was always that obedient girl, but also classical arts in any form, whether it's dance or music, that instills a lot of discipline in you.
Hmm.
So that is one thing, and no skill goes waste. So one of the things that I had to my Guruji made me learn is wrist exercises because Odissi has got a lot of wrist work. So he insisted that I do a particular exercise. I fill a bucket with water and I rotate my wrist clockwise and anti-clockwise. I keep on doing that with both my wrists. And wrist exercise is not something that we do very easily. We don't really focus on the wrist otherwise. So doing all of those actually made my wrists quite flexible. And now when there are certain surgeries that we have to do as gynecologists and obstetricians, uh, I I find it easier to do because my wrists are more flexible. So
Yeah.
I think I have have an advantage because of how my wrists can move.
Yeah, like you mentioned, nothing goes waste
Nothing
and
goes to
everything.
it.
Yeah, and now when you said about the rest thing, and when I think when you talk with your hands a lot, and
I
when
talk, I know,
you
I know. It is so embarrassing. Sometimes when I watch my videos, I say, why am I doing all of these dance movements? And when I'm conscious about it, I try to keep my hands to myself. I hold something with my hands. So
no,
um, I don't
I would
appear
say
like a complete
don't
weirdo.
hold it, don't hold it. I think like when people talk with their hands, it impacts a lot more. Some people are there who trying to consciously trying to talk with their hands or
Yeah.
something. They're just not like talking with their mouth. They want some expression or some body language,
Yeah.
and you have it, so don't stop. I would suggest that. That's
Thank
very
you.
beautiful about it. And
There's this
writing.
thing, isn't it? As that I forgot the exact number, but I think it might be as high as 80%. I cannot remember the exact number, but a very high percentage of our communication is non-verbal communication.
Yeah, 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 it is around like 65 to 70%.
Yes, probably. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah, yeah.
correct.
It
Uh,
consists of a lot of things. Your eye contact, to your facial, your tonality, not just the words, how you're standing, how you're
yeah,
addressing,
exactly.
how you're moving your body towards it. Sometimes when say now when in a relationship, in a long relationship, or in a very good bonding or friendship,
Hmm.
we say as a dialogue is like he knows me, she knows me without even saying. I can know what
Yeah,
she's thinking, what
yeah,
he's thinking without even saying a
yeah,
word. That what's like makes it true that the 70 or 80% of your communication is
yeah,
from your body and your thoughts. Because I think
yeah.
sometimes I have you ever encountered on it or not, like sometimes when somebody walks in a room and we know the intention or we know where
Mm,
is going to go, we can sense it
yeah,
basically. So yeah,
yeah. That's true.
that's yeah. Talking about your gynecologist career, like I have just one thing, like you bring life into life. So that's I I'm not sure because I have seen two births in my family, cousins and all, and I was there in the hospital, and when the baby came, I hold it for the first time. It was a very beautiful feeling. Even it was not mine, but seeing a
Yeah,
newborn
yeah,
covered in like that, and you when you hold it, you feel like, oh, like it's something special. And you do it and you make people's dream true, basically, I would say. Whenever a couple is out there trying to have a child and finally they have a child, the basically before that they love each other a lot, and after that dynamic totally changed. They fight over each other to love somebody else only. which is a part of them. So it changes the thing drastically. So I want to know that I know you whenever you do it, it is a very special feeling for you to hold it in. But there's you can't work on emotions in that
No, no,
profession. So
exactly. Yeah,
so
exactly. So we
how do
have.
you do it, and what is something interesting thing ever happened to you in that department? Would you like to share?
Oh gosh, it's full of so much excitement. I mean, I've had quite a few fights with my husband because my husband is not a doctor, and he complained that I never want to do anything adventurous on our holidays, um, and I had to keep telling him that, you know what, all the adrenaline I have, I exhaust them at work, and when I
Yeah,
come off work, I have no more adrenaline to use for any activity.
yeah,
So there's I mean, most of the times, thankfully, things are straightforward and we just go with the flow. The baby comes out, we show it to the parents, and then the midwife takes the baby to, wrap and keep warm and do all sorts of things. But sometimes things can go wrong, or we may need to intervene because things have already gone wrong, and that can be quite a stressful situation. Um, so at that moment, it's very important to keep your emotions in check, and that emotion can also be fear in us, because we don't want
yeah,
anyone to be in trouble. We also don't want ourselves to be in trouble. um, to hold those emotions and focus on the task at hand. So that, I think, comes a lot with experience, and gradually, as I grow older, I'm getting better at it. But that is something that most of us have to learn when we are young doctors, and we keep on developing on the skill. Uh, but I mean, no matter how difficult it is, I personally feel very thankful that I got a chance to experience this profession, uh, because it really has enabled me to grow as an individual. To prioritize, um, and to work on the immediate needs without letting anything distract me, but also at the same time to have an overview of the situation, um, and work together as a team. So it's quite interesting if you think about it.
yeah. It is. It is interesting. Have you had any story, a funny or a interesting one happen
Oh,
with you?
funny story would be husband's fainting.
Yeah, they do.
Husband's fainting, and as a doctor, I think that why? I mean, obviously, I don't verbalize it because it's up to them, but I think that sometimes even the patient, probably, I mean, looking at their expression, they also probably feel that, you know what, I was better off birthing on my own than to have you here.
Yeah,
Because in any case, we have two patients to deal with, the woman and the baby.
maybe.
And on top of that, if we have a third person fainting there, that just
Oh,
adds to it. We have a good laugh after it, after all the
all right.
resuscitation and TLC.
Yeah. I would like to ask you about something really personal. If you are comfortable, you can answer like that.
Sure.
I wanted to talk about the relationship you have in your life, being it a loved one or a friendship, or with your parents and everything. But firstly, with love, as I see in this today's generation, people are hopeful about love. They are very eager to have love in their life in that department, and very optimistic about it. But somewhere they are failing in it, or they are not I think they are, if they are not, are they not understanding it completely, or everybody wants it, but I don't know everything. Everybody want to try for it and all. So what do you think of love, and how was your relationship have been with other than with your husband in that department? Just
So my husband and I, we went to the same school. We were classmates. So we know each other since we were children, very young children. We have grown up together, and since we have been together for a very long time, and we know each other from very early on. There are many things that we have in common. See, we both grew up in South Calcutta in middle class environments. Plus,
Yeah,
we had the same set of teachers teaching us the same set of lessons. So, obviously, there are going to be similarities in thought process.
of
Plus,
course.
the two of them will have also been, two of us have also been together from quite a young age. We have been
Yeah,
quoting from quite a young age. So we exchanged our ideas, our, learnings uh, from other places. And that also impacted how we viewed the world. So we have influenced each other a lot. So there's a lot of similarity between the two of us, but at the heart of it, we are two very dissimilar people. I'm an out and out introvert. I'm what people would call probably a high functioning introvert. That
okay.
I can hold I hope I can hold proper conversation. Uh, but at other times, I will be completely withdrawn into my own corner, not wanting to talk to anyone at home. But my husband is an extrovert. You put him on stage, you will have stage fright. But at a party, he's going to be the life and soul of the party. I will probably be hiding in the toilet. Um, but we're two very different people, but we are also similar in a lot of respects, and we love to challenge each other. Um, but most importantly, I think we make each other better versions of ourselves. And this is what I think a good relationship is about, where where you have positives to contribute to the life of the other person. And that positive doesn't mean that you have to, cook and feed the other person, but at least in some way inspire the other person to be a better version of themselves, uh, which thankfully has worked in our favor. So, fortunately, I'm in a very happy space, romance wise. But as you rightly mentioned, there's a lot of effort that goes into it, a
Of
lot
course.
of effort. And I'll tell you something, you're obviously too young to think about marriages and weddings. But when I've spoken to people, I'll say something, and I don't know how it is for arranged marriages, but for love marriages at least, unless you have had a chance to live in with that person for some time, which obviously we did not, coming from an Indian society. Um, the first year of marriage is the hardest, and every single couple I've spoken to who have had love marriages had the same impression that it is so, so hard. And I mean, every single day I've had people, even for us, every single day we used to think, oh, we should separate, oh, we should go for a divorce. Because, I mean, for so long, you are boyfriend, girlfriend, lovers, but now suddenly you are also roommates.
Me. Yeah,
You might have known that the other person snores, but actually you have to bear the snoring right now. Most of the times, both the partners would be working and they have work stress and lots of different things happening in other aspects of their lives at the same time, and coming back home and investing the time and the energy to adjust living with another person can be very taxing.
it's like once my father told me a thing, and like it's like it have been stick with me like very promptly, and after that my perspective about things changed. He said the most expensive thing to maintain in the world, the universe, is is a relationship of any
Yeah,
kind.
yeah,
You can take a car, any machine, or any big thing, or any rich thing to a
yeah,
particular place, and they will fix it for you. But for a
yeah.
relationship, you can't go somewhere. You have to go to that particular person and communicate. Which
Yes, there's exactly. I mean, I can't agree with him more. It's there's so much that we have to invest into relationships.
yeah, the effort is like beautiful, and about that, what makes it beautiful when you put it a lot of effort and you find the fruitfulness of it. That's like the perfect. I wanted to know about the Indian market, about of textiles. Are there any fashion brands or people who are working towards it, and which can change it, or which you like and you would like to mention them?
There's a Co-optex, which is a weavers cooperative. It is under Tamil Nadu government now. It is
Mhm.
one of the few government organizations that I'm very honestly fond of. I mean, I support them wholeheartedly because I can see how much effort they put into developing crafts of Tamil Nadu and marketing them, even marketing them internationally. So recently there was a B2B textile event on sustainable textiles held in London, and they actually had sent their team over with their samples. I met them here as well. So I can see how much effort they are putting into developing things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a very good initiative. I feel in the upcoming years it will be known to everybody, and it will be like
Yeah,
the
hopefully. That's the dream.
yeah, it will happen while you're working like that and you're creating that much awareness. It will surely happen, and of course, your hard work will pay off, and yeah, people will get the recognition they deserve. I wanted to ask about one thing, like whenever we talk about Indian textile or the things, be it khadi or so many different textile, they are. Don't you feel that they are expensive or so expensive in a way? That's why they are not being catered to India easily,
No,
to the Indian
absolutely.
population.
I completely agree with you. The thing is that most of these heritage textiles that we talk about, whether it's Jamdani or Banarasi or Kanjivaram, if you trace history, you will find that they were made for royalty. They were actually
Yeah,
never made for plebeians like us.
yeah.
So if I was born 200 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to wear the saris that I'm now wearing. It's because as a
Hmm.
whole, the country has democratized and lots of people have received opportunities. My parents received the opportunity to be well educated. That's why I'm in the position I am in now, and that's why I can wear the saris that I can now. But even now, even then, there are some saris that I find are still very expensive, and I'm speaking from such a privileged position. I have absolutely
Yeah.
no doubt that as a whole, handloom is handloom textiles as a complete industry is not a very affordable sector for most people in India. Um, and if you talk about the young people, if I was in my early 20s, I wouldn't have been a handloom activist because I wouldn't
Yeah.
have been able to afford them. And as a professional woman now, it's easy for me to wax eloquent, but back in the day, I too would have probably gone for one of those fast fashion brands. uh, but having said that, there are still textiles that were made for the common people.
Okay.
Because common people were also wearing clothes. It's not
Yeah,
as
yeah,
if they were walking around naked. So there was textiles being made primarily in the villages, almost always of cotton, thick coarse cotton with basic designs for the common people. But the trouble is that for various reasons, and we don't have the time today to discuss all of them. And because if I start discussing that, I'll go on a tangent and we'll never be able to finish this. Uh, but for some reason, those even nowadays, those have become very expensive as well, which I find to be very, very unfair. I can still understand if a Banarasi is out of reach for most people. It takes a lot of time. The silk yarns themselves are expensive. It takes a lot of skill. But why are these coarse cotton um, fabrics that were actually originally made for of people who worked in the farms? Why are they still out of reach for the common person? Khadi, actually, if you go to Khadi government stores,
yeah.
Khadi is very affordable. And I usually refrain from using the word affordable because it's very relative. What is affordable to me now was not
Mm, of
affordable to me 10 years ago. So
course.
it's very uh, uh, subjective. So I don't really want to use that indiscriminately. But I find that compared to non-handloom clothes that are in the market right now, Khadi clothes from Khadi government stores actually are in the same price bracket. And I find them relatively fashionable as well. But Khadi is not marketed as well. See, marketing is mainly done by the
Mhm.
private companies. And whenever private organizations come into the picture, all sense of ethics go away.
Yeah, truly, like you mentioned, like, yeah, I think when people, we see like Olympics also right now, the outfit of the Indian team, these little things will shape at least awareness or some change in that either privileged one would start wearing or start consuming that. So
Hmm.
that's how I think that how can it can change in a way. I hope for the best, and I hope they it happens soon. I would like to ask with the ending question and the final question, and like after that I'll have an outro. I don't want to take more time of you. It's a weekend, and you want to also have fun, and it's all right. So and also very lame and a very funny question. It's nothing related to the textile or anything. I just wanted to ask that if you have any embarrassing, funny story, because I feel embarrassment turns into a funny incident after some time. So, like, if you have any, it's nothing like a very important or
Yeah,
forceful
I'm
to
sure
you.
I've been embarrassed a lot of times in my life. I guess I'm so used to being embarrassed now that I don't even think about all these incidents. But yeah, there have been times when, say, I'm getting, because I use public, most of us in London use public transport,
Yeah.
as do I, and I'm in a public transport and I'm distracted for some reason, or I'm very tired. Then I don't know. I inadvertently start talking in Bengali to other people. Like if it's a very crowded train and I want the other person to move, so instead of saying "Excuse me, can I please go past," I just end up saying "Dada ektu shorben," which is Bengali for "brother, can you please move?" And, and the person actually moves.
Oh,
I think we were talking about non-verbal communication. I think
yeah,
it's
that
probably that
that
the person knows that I'm asking him to move.
yeah, it's a funny thing, and the result was also, and we connected it with the something we talked about. And I think it's a
Yes.
perfect. God is giving a sign to. It's a perfect out of the end of the story, like connecting the dots from the starting. Uh, I would like to say thank you so much
Thank
for
you. Thank you,
the
Piyush. It was lovely talking to you.